when I think about the idea of utopian society, trying to work to make things better, I definitely think American Indian Studies has some ideas to contribute, and definitely from an Ojibwe perspective. The two things that really come to mind to me are respect and responsibility.
Okay.
So as some of the foundational sort of core values and the way that Ojibwe society ideally should operate. Not to say, again, that that's necessarily everyone does everything right all the time, of course, but the foundations behind respecting others and other viewpoints, and it's a sort of, I described it in class the other day as a little bit of a live and let live kind of philosophy, right. And in a general way that kind of works. It's like everyone has to make their own choices and their own decisions, and yet within that you should be keeping in mind respecting other people's decisions. You know, they're going to respect the fact that you have the personal autonomy and the individual right to make those, and you're going to respect their right as well. And so it gets into a balance between, I think, respect and then autonomy, but then within that autonomy you have a responsibility. And especially the way responsibility works, I think, is via relationships, whether it be family relationships or maybe friendships or colleagues or that type of thing, but responsibility so that you can see how your actions might affect others. That has to be part of the equation.
So kind of like emphasizing the need for a community who respects each other and is able, they affect other people's actions. So if somebody were to make a decision that somebody else didn't agree with, they would actually be able to see the results of that, and vice versa.
Yeah, and within, like, you know, historically within, like, Ojibwe society, relatives are really important, and really society was constructed, and some people would argue that nations should be constructed as a group of related kin, so that you have the idea that of nation as family. And if you think of that, it totally changes how you might treat other citizens if you think of them as relatives.
Yeah.
And if you greet each other, you know, as cousins, or within Ojibwe society, clan relatives, which aren't related by blood, but by a different manner. So that creates a different type of environment.
So it's almost like there's something that we talk about a lot in class. It's called like the doctrine of separate spheres, and whereas Western society is so focused on the individual and accumulating, you know, whatever, and just status based on yourself, whereas the separate sphere for like the Eastern world would be like more of like a collectivist more. So I feel like, how would you feel, what would be maybe some ways in which we could bring that about for our society, or steps that we would take in order to get there? It's pretty...
That's a good question.
Because
like...
I don't know, I've tried to think about it myself, and I just feel like definitely relating to other people and recognizing friendship and family would be a good way to do it, because then there's that level of respect there, and it's not all about the individual. But in terms of...
the individual still has their autonomy.
Right.
I think that's a difference that maybe doesn't always work. Like, some societies don't have the focus on the individual, but in Ojibwe society there's lots of individual autonomy. And so it's an interesting balance between that and then these relationships and respect and responsibility. But the idea of how to carry it out,
It's probably like talking like really huge social movements in order to get something
basically,
like that. Or
yeah.
kind of like evolution socially. So I guess
every society sort of has their core values and how, I mean, and a lot of times in American Indian Studies we have a real political focus as well, and we think of nationhood as so important, and that's how we derive our identity, is politically. And so it could be interesting. I mean, again, it would take, right, some type of national movement. It would take the president saying, we want to construct core American values that are, you know, respect and responsibility. We want to carry that out via, I would assume the education system would sort of, starting at a young age,
right.
be a part of a way to go.
maybe being even introduced to it earlier on than, say, just, going to college and having the
Right.
option of maybe specializing in a certain area, but maybe kind of, because when you're young, that's kind of when you form your mental schemas and stuff like that. So maybe if it's more of like an unconscious thing within the individual, it would be easier to kind of bring about those changes as a person got older.
Yeah, and that would have to be family-based. I mean, I think the parents would have to be on board and raise children that way. Like, it can be in the education system and infused in other ways in society, but it has to start at home with the basic values that kids are raised with.
Right.
Which does raise questions then, like, can you impose?
Yeah.
Then is this an imposition, and would American people want to create that type of society, or would American people say that conflicts with our values and that's not who we are?
Mm-hmm. So there'll definitely be some complication in trying to bring that about. So basically, yeah, our other questions were kind of just like the barriers. We kind of already went over modality of like achieving it and if it would be feasible. Do you think it would be feasible, though, to kind of bring that about? Like maybe, let's say, even if it's like centuries from now, or...
Oh,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, over time, I think any society can totally transform. Because looking in American Indian Studies from a perspective, we have seen total transformation of, life from within a few hundred years. And so, yeah, I think I can imagine that if American society wanted to make certain changes, that they would totally have the power to put that into place. I think the reason that I'm somewhat hesitant and I say, like, oh, that would be imposing, also sort of comes from American Indian Studies, because it relates back to cultural assimilation.
Okay.
And I think the way in which American Indians were told, you're going to have these core values. You're going to create a nuclear family, you're going to start a farm, and you're going to become a Christian, and you're going to become American.
Exactly.
And so, like, even though I think, like, oh, these ideas of respect and responsibility are so great, I do feel some hesitancy to say, like, that should be imposed, because
Right.
I can see the consequences of trying to impose certain cultural changes on any given society. That's where it has to come from within. What the people would have to sort of come together and work together to decide what they want.
And largely be able to conserve the fact that you have your own identity and should be able to have your identity without being told that it needs to be changed in order to fit to some standard.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
okay.
Because respecting the diversity within the society, even if somebody's values might go against what the idea of respect or responsibility, the challenge then is to still respect them.
Okay.
Even if they don't respect you.